The stars around Earth looked different that morning. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched his screen with growing worry. 3 days ago, his ship had picked up strange signals from beyond the solar system. Now those signals were getting closer. Jake had been in space for 15 years. He had seen meteor storms, solar flares, and broken ships floating in the dark. But he had never seen anything like the massive objects moving toward Earth. They were too big to be asteroids and too organized to be natural. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with quick fingers that danced across her control panel. "It's coming from the lead ship." Jake nodded. "Put it on screen." The main display flickered and showed something that made Jake's stomach drop. A tall creature with blue-gray skin and 4 arms stood before them. Its head was longer than a human head, with 3 eyes that glowed yellow. When it spoke, its voice was deep and carried the sound of absolute authority. "I am Commander Vexthul of the Zephyrian Empire. You will identify your species and submit to Imperial inspection immediately." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew of 23 humans stared back at him with wide eyes. They were explorers and scientists, not soldiers. The Discovery was built for research, not war. Its weapons were barely strong enough to clear space debris, but Jake had not gotten his captain's rank by backing down from trouble. He stepped forward and activated the communication system. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship, Discovery. We represent the human species of Earth. We welcome peaceful contact with your empire." The alien's 3 eyes seemed to focus more sharply on Jake. "Humans, a species unknown to our records. You will prepare for boarding and submit to Imperial authority. Your world will be cataloged and assigned a tribute quota." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "I'm sorry, but we don't understand. We're an independent species. We don't pay tribute to anyone." There was a long silence. Then Commander Vexthul made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was cold and harsh. "Independence is not permitted for lesser species. You have 1 rotation of your planet to surrender your military forces and prepare for Imperial rule. Failure to comply will result in corrective action." The transmission ended. Jake stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his crew. "Amy, get me a direct line to Earth Command. Priority 1. While Amy worked her controls, Jake studied the tactical display. The alien fleet had 47 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The smallest ship was twice the size of Earth's biggest battleship. The largest was like a floating city. "Earth Command online, sir," Amy reported. Admiral Lisa Bennett's face appeared on the screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had worked her way up through the ranks during the Mars conflicts. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her green eyes were sharp with intelligence. "Jake, we're tracking your situation. What's your assessment?" "They're demanding immediate surrender, Admiral. Complete submission to something called the Zephyrian Empire. They want tribute payments and military surrender." Admiral Bennett was quiet for a moment. "And if we refuse?" "They called it corrective action. I think they mean to attack Earth." "How many ships are we looking at?" 47, Admiral. All of them bigger than our largest vessels. We're outgunned by about 10 to 1, maybe more." Admiral Bennett nodded slowly. "Understood. Stand by for orders." The transmission switched to hold, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. He could see the fear in their faces, but also something else. Determination. Humans had faced impossible odds before. Amy looked up from her station. "Sir, I'm picking up more transmissions from the alien fleet. They're talking to each other. Can you translate any of it?" "Working on it, sir. The computer is trying to build a language matrix." She paused, listening to something through her headset. "Sir, I think they're talking about us." The computer caught a few words, something about primitive species and easy conquest. Jake almost smiled. Easy conquest. If these aliens knew anything about human history, they would know that humans had never made anything easy for anyone. Admiral Bennett's face returned to the screen. Her expression was grim but determined. "Jake, you are ordered to deliver the following message to the alien commander. Tell him that humanity rejects his demands. Earth is not for sale, not for rent, and definitely not for conquest. If he wants a fight, he's about to get one. Jake felt a surge of pride. Yes, Admiral, and our orders after that? Hold position and observe. The fleet is moving to defensive positions around Earth. We're going to show these aliens what humans do when someone threatens our home. Jake nodded and cut the transmission. He turned to Amy. Open a channel to the alien fleet. The blue-gray face of Commander Vexthul appeared on screen again. This time he looked slightly annoyed. Human, have you prepared your surrender? Jake straightened his shoulders and looked directly into those 3 yellow eyes. Commander Vexthul, I have a message from the government of Earth. We reject your demands. We reject your authority. And we reject your threats. If you want to start a war with humanity, then let's get started. The alien's face went through several expressions that Jake couldn't read. Finally, Vexthul spoke again, and his voice carried a note of disbelief. You are a single world with inferior technology. We are an empire that spans 3,000 star systems. You cannot possibly believe you can resist us. Jake smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. Commander, you're about to learn something that every species that has ever fought humans eventually learns. We're really, really good at this. The transmission ended. Around the bridge, Jake's crew began preparing for what was coming next. In the distance, the alien fleet began moving into attack formation. The first interstellar war in human history was about to begin. 3 weeks after the first meeting with humans, Fleet Admiral Kethmore arrived at the edge of the Sol system with 800 warships. He had conquered 47 worlds in his career. Each time, the pattern was the same. Show overwhelming. Force, demand surrender. Accept tribute. Simple and efficient. Kethmore was a Zephyrian like Commander Vexthul, but older and more experienced. His forearms moved gracefully as he studied the tactical display showing the human homeworld. Earth looked small and blue, with only a few dozen ships defending it. Admiral, the humans have refused our final ultimatum, reported his communications officer. They say they will fight to the last ship. Kethmore made a sound of annoyance. Foolish. Begin the standard attack pattern. Target their largest ships first. Once we destroy their fleet, they will surrender quickly enough. But as the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation, something unexpected happened. The human ships scattered in all directions. Instead of forming battle lines like every other species in the galaxy, they split up and disappeared. Where did they go? Kethmore demanded. Sir, they've moved behind asteroids, space stations, and some have entered the planet's atmosphere. Our sensors are having trouble tracking them. On Earth, General Dan Parker watched the alien fleet from his command center deep underground. He was a short, stocky man with gray hair and scars from the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. Around him, dozens of officers tracked every ship in the solar system. They're trying to find our ships, reported Colonel Janet Brooks, his intelligence chief. Their formation suggests they expect us to fight like they do. General Parker smiled grimly. They're in for a surprise. Signal all units. Operation Ghost Dance is now active. Across the solar system, human ships began their deadly work. Captain Ben Clark commanded the destroyer UES Valiant, hidden behind a large asteroid near Jupiter. His ship was small compared to the alien vessels, but it was fast and hard to detect. Target acquired, reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Mike Torres. Zephyrian cruiser bearing 270. She's separated from the main fleet. Fire when ready, Captain Clark ordered. The Valiant's missiles struck the alien ship from behind. The Zephyrian vessel's shields flared and died, and atmosphere began venting from multiple holes in its hull. Before the aliens could respond, the Valiant was gone, diving behind another asteroid. Similar attacks happened throughout the system. Human ships would appear from nowhere, strike hard, and vanish before the aliens could shoot back. The Zephyrians had never seen anything like it. Admiral Kethmore watched his tactical display with growing frustration. Red lights showed damaged and destroyed ships scattered across his formation. The humans were hitting his fleet like insects, small and quick and impossible to catch. This is not how civilized species fight, he growled. Order all ships to maintain tight formation. These hit-and-run tactics cannot succeed against organized resistance. But the humans had other ideas. Captain Lucy Hayes commanded a small squadron of fighters near Mars. Her ships were tiny compared to the Zephyrian vessels, barely larger than shuttlecraft, but they were incredibly fast and carried powerful weapons for their size. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy their big ships," she told her pilots over the radio. "We're trying to break their formation and make them panic." Her fighters streaked toward a group of Zephyrian destroyers. The aliens fired their defensive weapons, but the human ships were too small and too fast. They slipped through the defensive, fire like needles through cloth. Captain Hayes targeted the lead destroyer's sensor array. Her missiles struck home, blinding the ship. Around her, her pilots hit communication arrays, weapon mounts, and engine sections. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian formation was in chaos. "This is impossible," Admiral Kethmore snarled. "They are primitives with inferior technology. How are they doing this to us?" His tactical officer, a nervous young Krillian named Thekval, studied the battle reports. "Sir, they don't fight like any species we've encountered. They use individual ship tactics instead of fleet coordination. Each vessel acts independently, making them unpredictable." The battle continued for hours. The Zephyrians had more ships and bigger weapons, but the humans had something else. They had experience fighting against impossible odds, and they had imagination. Commander Lisa Hayes, Ben Clark's sister, commanded the heavy cruiser UES Storm. Her ship was one of the largest in the human fleet, but it was still tiny compared to Zephyrian battleships. When 3 alien dreadnoughts cornered her near Earth's moon, she did something that shocked everyone watching. Instead of trying to fight or run, she aimed her ship directly at the largest enemy vessel and pushed her engines to maximum power. Her crew had only seconds to reach the escape pods before impact. The storm struck the Zephyrian dreadnought at full acceleration. The explosion could be seen from Earth's surface, a bright flash that lit up the night sky. When the light faded, both ships were gone, along with most of the second dreadnought's weapons. Admiral Kethmore stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "She destroyed her own ship just to damage ours. What kind of species does such things?" The answer came from unexpected sources. Across the solar system, human civilian ships were joining the fight. Cargo haulers rammed alien vessels, mining ships used their industrial lasers as weapons, and even passenger liners evacuated orbital stations while firing their few defensive guns. On Earth, every human watched the battle through their communication networks. They saw their ships outgunned and outnumbered, but they also saw them fighting with a fierce joy that confused the aliens completely. Captain Jake Morrison, still aboard the Discovery, recorded a message that would be broadcast across the galaxy years later. "To any aliens listening to this," he said calmly while explosions lit up space around his ship, "you need to understand something about humans. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten very, very good at it. And when someone threatens our home, we don't just fight to win. We fight like our children's lives depend on it, because they do." As the first day of battle ended, Admiral Kethmore realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His fleet had superior numbers and technology, but the humans were winning anyway. They were winning because they wanted it more. 6 months into the war, Dr. Helen Torres made a discovery that would change everything. She worked in a secret laboratory buried deep under the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by pieces of destroyed Zephyrian ships. Her team had been studying alien technology since the first battles began. Helen was a small woman with dark hair and tired eyes. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the war started. Around her, dozens of scientists and engineers worked on tables covered with strange alien devices. "The power source is incredible," she told General Parker during their daily briefing. "Their ships use something called quantum fold generators. The energy output is 10 times what our fusion reactors can produce." General Parker leaned forward in his chair. "Can we copy it?" "Better than that," Helen smiled for the first time in weeks. "We can improve it. Their design is thousands of years old. They never changed it because it worked well enough, but we can make it work better." While Helen's team worked on alien technology, the war continued across the solar system. The fighting had spread beyond Earth to every human colony and outpost. The Zephyrians expected quick victory, but instead found themselves in a grinding battle that grew harder every day. Commander Rick Stone led a special unit called the Ghost Squadron. His job was to capture alien ships intact, so scientists like Helen could study them. Rick was tall and thin, with quick reflexes that had kept him alive through dozens of dangerous missions. His current target was a Zephyrian command ship orbiting Mars. The vessel was huge, almost a mile long, and heavily defended. Most military commanders would call attacking it suicide. Rick called it Tuesday. "Remember, we need the computer core undamaged," he told his team as their small ship approached the alien vessel. "Kill the crew if you have to, but don't touch the computers." Rick's team of 12 Marines had trained for months in zero-gravity combat. They wore modified spacesuits covered with weapons and cutting tools. Each person carried enough firepower to level a building. The attack began when their ship attached itself to the Zephyrian hull like a parasite. Rick's team cut through the alien armor using plasma torches stolen from previous battles. Within minutes, they were inside the enemy ship. The Zephyrians were not ready for human boarding tactics. Their security forces expected civilized behavior, soldiers who announced themselves and fought in orderly formations. Instead, they faced humans who moved through their ship like deadly shadows. Rick's Marines used the ship's own corridors against the defenders. They turned off lights, filled sections with smoke, and used the alien ventilation system to move around unseen. The Zephyrians had superior numbers, but they were fighting on human terms now. "Deck 7 secured," reported Marine Sergeant Paul Davis over the radio. "These aliens really don't know how to fight inside their own ships." "Copy that," Rick replied as he planted explosive charges on a blast door. "Remember, we're not here to hold territory. We're here to grab what we need and get out." The battle for the command ship lasted 3 hours. When it ended, Rick's team had captured the entire computer database and killed most of the crew. More importantly, they had learned something that would terrify the Zephyrian leadership. Back on Earth, Captain Sue Martinez was having her own success with captured alien technology. She commanded the first human stealth ship, built using Zephyrian cloaking devices that Helen's team had improved. The ship was invisible to alien sensors and could strike anywhere in the solar system without warning. Sue was a quiet woman who had grown up on a mining station. She understood space better than most people understood their own homes. Her ship, the UES Shadow, had already destroyed 15 alien vessels without taking a single hit in return. "Target approaching from Sector 7, reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Carl Reed. "It's a supply convoy, 5 ships, light escort." Sue studied the tactical display. The alien convoy was carrying ammunition and spare parts to the main Zephyrian fleet. Destroying it would hurt their ability to continue fighting. "Take us in close," she ordered. "I want to board the lead ship before we destroy the others." The Shadow moved silently toward the alien convoy. The Zephyrians had no idea death was approaching them. When Sue's ship finally attacked, it was already too late for the aliens to respond. Meanwhile, the war's biggest surprise was happening at Proxima Station, humanity's furthest outpost. Colonel Jack Turner commanded the small base with only 200 Marines. When a Zephyrian assault force of 5,000 soldiers attacked the station, everyone expected it to fall quickly. Instead, Colonel Turner turned the mining station into a fortress that would become legendary in human military history. "They want to take our station," he told his Marines over the communication system. "Let's show them what happens when you mess with human engineers." Turner's men had spent months preparing for this moment. They turned mining lasers into anti-ship weapons, converted atmospheric processors into chemical weapon factories, and rigged every corridor with explosives and traps. When the Zephyrian assault began, they found themselves attacking not just a military base but an entire industrial complex that had been weaponized by creative humans. Cargo containers became guided missiles, maintenance robots became mobile bombs, and even the station's artificial gravity became a weapon. The battle lasted 6 days. When it ended, Colonel Turner's force had not only held the station but captured over half the attacking aliens. The Zephyrian commander, a proud warrior named Krixtal, was found sitting in a corner staring at nothing and mumbling about humans who turned everything into weapons. But the most important victory happened in Helen's laboratory. Her team had finally cracked the secret of Zephyrian faster-than-light communication. For the first time since the war began, humans could listen to alien military broadcasts across their entire empire. What they heard would change the war completely. "General," Helen said as she burst into Parker's office, "you need to hear this. We've been monitoring their high command communications. They're not just fighting us, they're terrified of us." The recording she played revealed the truth that would soon spread across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire was not just losing battles to humans. They were losing their confidence, their certainty, and their belief in their own superiority. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy's greatest empire was learning what it felt like to be afraid. 2 years into the war, Supreme Chancellor Yathara called an emergency meeting of the Zephyrian High Council. She was the oldest member of her species, with pale blue skin that had darkened with age and wisdom gained over 4 centuries. Her 6 arms moved with careful precision as she prepared the council chamber for what would be the most important meeting in galactic history. The council chamber was a massive room built for beings of 12 different species. Representatives from across the Zephyrian Empire gathered around a circular table that floated in the center of the room. Each delegate had received the same urgent message: review critical battle footage from the human war. Council member Vexithon, from the warrior Krillian species, was the first to speak. His forearms were covered in ritual scars from dozens of conquered worlds. "Chancellor, our military reports make no sense. How can a single primitive world resist our entire empire?" Chancellor Yathara activated the main display screen. "That is what we are here to discover. Fleet Admiral Kethmore has sent us complete recordings from every major battle. We will watch them together and decide our next course of action." The first recording began. It showed the Battle of Titan, where Marine Sergeant Paul Davis led a boarding party of 20 humans against a Zephyrian heavy cruiser. The council watched in silence as the humans cut through the ship's hull using improvised tools. What happened next made several council members step back from the table. Davis and his team moved through the alien ship like they had built it themselves. They used maintenance shafts, service tunnels, and even garbage chutes to attack from unexpected directions. "Pause the recording," ordered Council Member Thaisara, a tall female from the peaceful Veltharian species. "These humans are using our own ship against us. How do they understand our technology so quickly?" "Keep watching," Chancellor Yathara replied grimly. The recording continued. Sergeant Davis reached the ship's engine room where 50 Zephyrian warriors waited in defensive positions. Instead of attacking directly, he did something that shocked the watching council. He turned the ship's own power systems into weapons. Davis overloaded several power conduits, causing explosions that filled the engine room with superheated plasma. Then he used the ship's fire suppression system to flood the area with toxic gases. The Zephyrian defenders died without Davis firing a single shot. "This is impossible," whispered Council Member Krelnav, whose species had been warriors for 1,000 years. "He killed 50 trained soldiers using nothing but ship maintenance systems." The next recording was worse. It showed Commander Kate Wilson's fighter squadron attacking a Zephyrian battleship formation. Her 12 small fighters faced 47 heavy warships. By every rule of galactic warfare, the humans should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, Wilson's pilots did something that violated every military doctrine in the Empire. They used their own damaged fighters as guided missiles. When their ships took too much damage to continue fighting, the human pilots would aim at enemy vessels and eject at the last second. The Council watched in horror as human fighters exploded against Zephyrian hulls with devastating effect. Each small ship carried enough explosive fuel to cripple a much larger vessel. In 15 minutes, Wilson's squadron had destroyed or disabled half the enemy formation. "They sacrifice expensive military equipment like it means nothing," observed Council Member Zethral, the Empire's chief military advisor. "No civilized species wastes resources like this." "Perhaps," said Chancellor Yathara, They do not see it as waste. The third recording came from the siege of New Geneva Colony. The Council expected to see a normal civilian evacuation when Zephyrian ground forces surrounded the human settlement. What they saw instead challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human colonists did not surrender or flee. Children operated anti-aircraft weapons with deadly accuracy. Elderly humans manufactured explosives in basement workshops. Farmers turned agricultural equipment into military vehicles. Even the family pets seemed trained to attack Zephyrian soldiers. "Every human on that world is a soldier," said Council Member Thysaara, her voice filled with disbelief. From children to grandparents, they all fight with professional skill. But the recording that broke the Council's resolve showed Captain Greg Foster's final battle. His ship, the UES Defiance, had been surrounded by 30 Zephyrian vessels near Jupiter. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and had no chance of escape. Instead of surrendering, Captain Foster activated his ship's fusion reactor overload. His final transmission was broadcast across all frequencies so every ship in the area could hear it. "This is Captain Greg Foster of the UES Defiance." His voice was calm and steady. "To any Zephyrians listening, remember this moment. Remember that humans would rather die than kneel. And remember that if you want to fight us, you better bring more ships." The fusion explosion destroyed Foster's ship and 6 Zephyrian vessels. 12 more enemy ships suffered heavy damage. One human had traded his life for more enemy casualties than most species lost in entire battles. The council chamber was silent for long minutes after the recordings ended. Finally, Council Member Vexathon spoke, his warrior's voice shaking with an emotion none of them had felt in centuries. "They fight like death means nothing to them. They turn everything into weapons. They never surrender, never retreat, never accept defeat." He paused and looked around the table. What kind of species creates soldiers like this? Chancellor Yathara had been studying human behavior since the war began. She had read every report, analyzed every battle, and reached a conclusion that terrified her. "They are not soldiers," she said quietly. "This is how all humans fight. This is how their entire species approaches conflict. They have spent thousands of years fighting each other, and they have become something we never expected to encounter." "What do you mean?" asked Council Member Thysaara. Chancellor Yathara stood and looked around the table at representatives of 12 species that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia. "We have encountered a species that treats war as an art form. They do not fight to win territory or resources. They fight to prove they cannot be conquered. And after watching these recordings, I believe they are right." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in the Empire's history, the Zephyrian High Council voted to surrender to a species they had underestimated. Admiral Pete Johnson was preparing for what everyone expected to be the final battle of the war. His ship, the UES Liberty, floated near Earth's moon with the remaining human fleet. They had fought for 2 years against impossible odds, and now, the Zephyrian Empire was sending their largest war fleet ever assembled. Pete was an old soldier with gray hair and hands scarred from years of ship repairs. He had commanded vessels in the Mars Rebellion, the asteroid mining wars, and now humanity's first interstellar conflict. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons and systems one last time. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the jump point," reported Lieutenant Nancy Cooper, his sensor officer. "The alien fleet is bigger than anything we've seen before." Pete nodded grimly. Intelligence reports suggested the Zephyrians were bringing over 2,000 ships for this final assault. The human fleet had maybe 300 vessels left, and most of those were damaged from previous battles. "Signal all ships," Pete ordered. "Prepare for final defensive formation. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as possible." But before the expected enemy fleet could arrive, something unexpected happened. A single Zephyrian ship appeared at the edge of Earth's sensor range. It was not a warship, but a diplomatic vessel flying white banners of truce. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the alien ship," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Tom Blake. "They're requesting permission to speak with our leadership." Pete frowned. After 2 years of war, now they want to talk? The diplomatic ship carried Ambassador Kethanara, an elderly Zephyrian female with skin that had turned almost white with age. She had served the Empire for over 3 centuries and had negotiated the surrender of 40 different species. But she had never carried a message like the one she brought to Earth. President Maria Santos received the alien ambassador in the newly rebuilt United Nations building in New York. Maria was a strong woman in her 60s who had led humanity through the darkest days of the war. She sat across from the tall alien at a simple metal table, with no ceremony or fancy decorations. "Madam President," Ambassador Kethanara began, her voice carrying the weight of defeat, "I come with an offer of immediate and unconditional surrender from the Zephyrian Empire." Maria blinked in surprise. Around the room, her advisors looked at each other with confusion. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Did you say surrender?" "Yes, Madam President. The Zephyrian High Council has voted unanimously to end this war immediately. We offer complete withdrawal from your solar system, recognition of human sovereignty, and payment of war damages." Dr. Alan Ross, Earth's chief alien specialist, leaned forward in his chair. He was a thin man with thick glasses who had spent the war studying Zephyrian psychology and culture. "Ambassador, forgive my confusion, but your empire has superior numbers and technology. Why are you surrendering when you could still win this war?" Ambassador Kethanara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Dr. Ross, my species has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. We have conquered over 10,000 worlds. We have seen every type of warfare that exists." She paused and looked directly at President Santos. "Until we met humans." "I don't understand," Maria replied. "Your species fights in ways that we cannot comprehend. You turn every piece of equipment into a weapon. You sacrifice expensive ships like they are arrows. Your civilians fight with the skill of professional soldiers. Your children learn military tactics before they learn to read properly." Ambassador Kethanara activated a small device that projected a holographic display showing battle statistics. "In 2 years of war, humanity has destroyed over 4,000 of our ships. You have killed more Zephyrian soldiers than we have lost in the previous century, and you have done this while being outnumbered 10 to 1. Dr. Ross studied the statistics with amazement. "These numbers suggest you're losing the war." "We are not losing the war, Doctor. We have already lost it. The moment we chose to fight humans, we doomed ourselves to defeat." The ambassador turned off the display. "Our leadership has concluded that humans represent an evolutionary advancement in warfare that we cannot match." President Santos sat back in her chair. "What exactly are you offering?" "Complete withdrawal of all Zephyrian forces from human space, formal recognition of Earth and all human colonies as independent territory, payment of 50 trillion credits as war damages, and most importantly, a mutual defense treaty." "Defense treaty?" Maria asked. "Madam President, after watching your species fight, our empire has decided that humans should be allies, not enemies. We would prefer to have human tactical knowledge working with us rather than against us." The treaty negotiations took 3 weeks. The final agreement was signed aboard the UES Liberty, with Admiral Pete Johnson representing the human military, and Ambassador Kethanara representing the Zephyrian Empire. The surrender document contained several secret clauses that would not become public for many years. The most important was Article 7, which designated humanity as the galaxy's official military consultants for any future conflicts. Commander Sarah Blake attended the signing ceremony as a witness. She was a young officer who had fought in dozens of battles during the war. As she watched the alien ambassador formally surrender to humanity, she thought about how the war had changed everything. "Admiral," she said to Pete Johnson after the ceremony ended, "do you think they're really afraid of us?" Pete looked out the window at the stars where human ships now patrolled freely. "Sarah, I think they're terrified of us, and maybe that's not a bad thing." 6 months later, when other alien species heard about the war, they all asked the same question. How had a single world defeated the galaxy's greatest empire? The answer was always the same: The Zephyrians would show them the battle recordings. Every species that watched humans fight reached the same conclusion that the Empire had reached. Some species were meant to be friends, not enemies. Humanity had earned their place among the stars not through diplomacy or trade, but by demonstrating that they were very, very good at something the galaxy had never seen before. They were artists of war, and their art was so terrifying that an entire empire had surrendered rather than continue fighting them. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. More importantly, most species decided they never wanted to find out what humans could do when they really got angry. The war was over and humanity had won by being themselves.